Welcome to Ctrl+Talk. This is Anthony and Kate. Today we're doing a deep dive into the history of Red Hat Linux.
Using excerpts from the Fedora Project wiki.
You might be thinking, history sounds dry, but trust us.
Oh, yeah.
There are some seriously interesting nuggets in here.
It's not just some dusty timeline.
From code names like Hurricane.
Just some controversial decisions that actually shaped the entire Linux landscape as we know it.
So let's rewind all the way back to the early days, pre-1995.
The Wild West days.
Back then, even setting up networking on Linux was a huge pain.
It's true.
You practically needed a computer science degree
just
to get your machine talking to the internet.
What's fascinating is that even in those early beta versions, Red Hat was already prioritizing user experience with their focus on graphical tools.
Wow.
They were thinking about making Linux accessible, which was revolutionary.
So they were kind of like the pioneers of user-friendly Linux.
Absolutely, and that focus on user experience played a major role in their success.
Now, speaking of those early days, did you know that Red Hat version naming conventions were...
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's just say they were interesting.
Let's just say that.
Mother's Day +1. Seriously.
Yeah, well, you have to remember, this was the mid-90s.
Right.
The early days of open source software.
Right.
There wasn't really a playbook for things like version naming.
Right.
Red Hat was figuring it out as they went along.
Right.
And sometimes marketing got involved.
Wait, marketing?
For example, there was version 3.0.3.
Right.
Which was actually supposed to be 2.2.
What?
But apparently, marketing thought that 3.0.3 sounded more impressive.
Wow. So even back then, marketing was playing games with version number.
It's a tale as old as time.
Right.
But beyond the quirky names,
okay,
what's really interesting is how Red Hat's approach to versioning evolved. They shifted from these point releases to a more continuous development model, which really mirrors how software development practices have changed over time.
So they were ahead of the curve, even back then.
In many ways, yes.
Okay, let's move on to something a little more fun.
Okay, code names.
Red Hat had some real jijams.
Okay, hit me with some of these code names.
Picasso, Hurricane, Cartman.
Really?
And they followed a very specific rule for these names.
Wait, a rule for code names. Tell me more.
Name N and N+1 had to have an ISA relationship.
Okay.
But here's the kicker. They could not have that same ISA relationship with N+2.
That's so specific. Who comes up with these rules? It's like they had a secret society dedicated to code name creation.
It doesn't make you wonder. But these code names weren't just for fun.
Oh, really?
They actually offer glimpses into the culture and personality of the Red Hat team at the time.
Little window into the past.
Little window into the past.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So we've got quirky version names, mysterious code names. What else happened in those early years that shaped Red Hat's trajectory? Well, let's talk about some of their key innovations and decisions.
Yeah.
Things that weren't just important for Red Hat, but actually impacted the entire Linux world.
Lay it on me. What kind of decisions are we talking about?
Well, for starters, they introduced RPM, which stands for Red Hat Package Manager.
Right.
This was a huge deal.
Really?
Because it revolutionized how software was installed, updated, and managed on Linux systems.
So before RPM?
It was a lot more complicated and time-consuming.
So RPM was basically like bringing order to the chaos of Linux software management.
Exactly. It made life so much easier for developers and users alike.
I can imagine.
It was a game changer.
Yeah.
Then there's the switch to glibc 2.0.
Okay.
The GUC library, which is a core component of any Linux system.
Right.
This decision was a big step towards improving performance and compatibility.
I see. So these decisions were about more than just Red Hat.
Yeah.
They were about advancing Linux as a whole.
That's a key point to understand about Red Hat.
Yeah.
They've always been deeply invested in the success of the broader Linux ecosystem.
Right.
Now, are you ready for a controversial decision?
Bring it on.
Okay, Red Hat made the choice to stick with libc 5.3,
Okay.
an older version of the C library.
Okay.
Instead of moving to the newer 5.4 version. This caused quite a stir in the Linux community at the time.
Why was that so controversial? What was wrong with the newer version?
Well, the newer libc 5.4 was actually plagued with problems.
Oh.
It was buggy and unstable.
Oh, wow.
Red Hat recognized this and decided to prioritize stability over chasing the latest trends.
So they went against the grain.
Yeah.
And stuck with what they knew worked. That's a bold move.
It was a gamble, but it paid off.
Okay.
Red Hat's decision ultimately reinforced their reputation for delivering a stable and reliable Linux distribution.
Which was
exactly what businesses were looking for.
Right.
That's fascinating.
So they gained credibility by sticking to their guns.
Yeah.
And prioritizing stability over what everyone else was doing.
Exactly. And you know, this decision wasn't just about technical considerations.
Oh, really?
It also revealed Red Hat's emerging business strategy.
Okay.
They were starting to focus on the enterprise and market businesses that needed a rock-solid operating system they could depend on.
So this was a turning point for Red Hat.
In many ways, yes.
Okay.
It marked the beginning of their journey towards becoming the enterprise Linux powerhouse they are today.
Right.
But before we get ahead of ourselves,
Okay.
let's talk about another pivotal moment, the birth of Fedora.
Yes, Fedora.
Severn.
I remember reading about the Severn release.
Yeah.
It was a major turning point, right?
Absolutely. Severn marked the merging of Red Hat's open development process with the Fedora Linux project.
Yeah, okay.
This is the moment the Fedora project, as we know it, was born.
So up until that point, Red Hat's development process wasn't fully open?
It was open to a certain extent.
Okay.
But with Fedora, they took it to a whole new level.
Really?
They embraced community-driven development fully, recognizing the power of collaboration and shared innovation.
That's a pretty big deal. So Fedora wasn't just a new Linux distribution.
No.
It was a statement about Red Hat's commitment to open source and community involvement.
Exactly. And that commitment has been instrumental in the success of both Fedora and Red Hat as a whole.
I see.
It's a testament to the power of working together.
Well, this has been quite a journey already.
I know, right?
And we've only just scratched the surface of Red Hat's history.
Yeah.
We've talked about the early days, those quirky version names, their bold decisions,
Yes.
and the birth of Fedora. What's next on our Red Hat adventure?
I'm glad you asked because things are about to get even more interesting. We're back with part 2 of our Red Hat deep dive.
All right, so we left off talking about the birth of Fedora.
Right.
This was a big step for Red Hat embracing community-driven development in a really significant way.
It was. But to understand the full impact of Fedora, we need to take a step back and look at the evolution of Red Hat Linux itself.
Okay, let's rewind a bit. Where does the story of Red Hat Linux begin?
It all started back in 1994 with a simple beta release aptly named Halloween.
Halloween?
It was the beginning of something big, something that would change the tech landscape forever.
Halloween, that's a pretty fitting name for a release that would eventually spawn a tech giant, right?
You could say that, but it wasn't just the technology that was innovative. Red Hat's approach to business was also unique. They were one of the first companies to truly embrace the open source model.
So they were pioneers in open source business as well. That's interesting because today open source is everywhere. It's hard to imagine the tech world without it.
It's true, and Red Hat played a huge role in making open source not just acceptable, but essential in the enterprise world.
Okay, so they started with this innovative beta release, embraced open source, and then what? How did they go from a small startup to a global enterprise?
Well, a big part of their success can be attributed to some key partnerships they formed along the way, partnerships that helped them reach a wider audience and gain credibility in the industry.
I see. So who were some of these key partners?
One of the most significant partnerships was with Digital, which later became Compaq and then part of HP. Back in 1995, Digital released a promotional CD of Red Hat Linux for their Alpha platform.
For their Alpha platform.
This was a big deal because it exposed Red Hat to a whole new audience.
So it was like an early example of cross-platform compatibility, and this partnership helped them gain a foothold in the server market.
Exactly. It was a win-win situation. Digital got a solid Linux distribution for their Alpha platform, and Red Hat gained exposure to a new market segment. This partnership paved the way for Red Hat to become a major player in the enterprise server market.
Okay, that makes sense. What other partnerships were crucial to Red Hat's growth?
Well, you can't talk about Red Hat's partners without mentioning IBM. This partnership, which started in the late 1990s, was monumental. It helped to legitimize Linux in the eyes of large corporations.
IBM was a giant in the tech industry back then. Their endorsement must have been huge for Red Hat.
It was. IBM's backing sent a clear message to the corporate world. Linux was ready for the enterprise. And this partnership has only grown stronger over the years, with both companies collaborating on a wide range of projects from cloud computing to artificial intelligence.
So Red Hat went from those early, somewhat chaotic days to forging these incredibly important partnerships. But they didn't just rely on corporate partnerships, did they? What about the open source community?
You're absolutely right. Red Hat wouldn't be where it is today without the contributions of countless developers and enthusiasts around the world. The Red Hat community is one of the most vibrant and active in the open source world.
I can imagine open source communities are known for their passionate and dedicated members. How has this community shaped the development of Red Hat Linux?
In countless ways. From bug fixes to feature requests, the community has played a vital role in making Red Hat Linux what it is today. They provide invaluable feedback, contribute code, and help to spread the word about Red Hat.
It sounds like a true symbiotic relationship. Red Hat provides the platform and the community helps to shape and improve it. It's a real testament to the power of open source collaboration.
Exactly. And it's not just about code contributions. The community also provides invaluable support and documentation, making Red Hat Linux accessible to a wider range of users.
So it's a true ecosystem of collaboration and innovation. That's really impressive.
It is. And it all goes back to that initial commitment to open source that Red Hat made early on. They understood that by embracing the community, they could achieve so much more than they could on their own.
That's a valuable lesson for any company, especially in the tech industry.
It is, but Red Hat's story is more than just a feel-good tale of community collaboration. They also made some tough choices, some controversial decisions that ultimately shaped their destiny.
Okay, let's talk about some of those decisions. We touched on the libc 5.3 decision earlier, but I'm sure there are other moments where Red Hat had to make difficult choices.
You're right, and those choices often reflected their evolving business strategy and their commitment to serving the needs of enterprise customers.
I'm eager to hear more about this, but I think it's time to jump back into those decisions,
Right, let's dive in.
where Red Hat had to make those tough choices.
One decision that really stands out is Red Hat's move to create Red Hat Enterprise Linux, or
Oh yeah, RHEL.
RHEL as it's known today.
Right, RHL.
It's a kind of a legendary name in the Linux world.
Yeah.
But for those who aren't familiar, can you explain what makes RHEL so special?
Yeah, what is it?
RHEL marked a significant shift for Red Hat.
Okay.
It signaled their commitment to providing a stable, commercially supported Linux distribution, specifically for enterprise customers.
Okay.
Businesses need an operating system
Right.
they can rely on with professional support and a predictable release cycle. RHEL provided all of that.
So it was more than just a new version of Red Hat Linux. It was a whole new approach tailored for demands of businesses.
Exactly, and it was a smart move. RHEL quickly became the gold standard for enterprise Linux, and it's still the dominant player in the market today.
Wow.
Think about it. Banks, airlines, government agencies, they all rely on RHEL to run their critical systems.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. And to think it all started with that little beta release called Halloween back in 1994. It's amazing how far they've come.
It is remarkable, but there's another layer to the RHEL story
Oh,
that I think is particularly interesting. RHEL is actually built on the foundation of Fedora,
right,
which, as we discussed earlier, is a community-driven project.
right, okay,
So you have this really interesting dynamic
okay,
where innovation is happening in Fedora with all its community involvement,
right.
and then those innovations are stabilized and hardened in RHEL for enterprise use.
It's like a two-pronged approach.
It's a brilliant model, and it's one of the reasons why Red Hat has been so successful.
I see.
They've managed to strike a balance between community-driven development and enterprise-grade stability. They leverage the best of both worlds.
Okay, so let's bring it all together. We've covered a lot of ground here.
I don't know, right?
From those early beta releases to the evolution of Red Hat Linux, the creation of Fedora, the rise of RHEL, and the crucial role of the community.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
What stands out to you as the most significant moment in Red Hat's history?
That's a tough one. There have been so many pivotal moments. But if I had to choose, I'd say it was the decision to create Fedora. It was a bold move,
Yeah,
essentially opening up their development process to the world.
right.
It solidified their commitment to open source and showed a deep understanding of the power of community collaboration.
I think I agree with you. Fedora wasn't just a new distribution, it was a statement. It showed Red Hat's values and their vision for the future of Linux. And that vision has had a huge impact on the tech industry as a whole. They proved that open source isn't just some idealistic concept. It can be a viable business model, and community collaboration can drive real innovation.
Absolutely. And that's the key takeaway here. What does this Red Hat journey tell us? Well, it shows that even tech giants like Red Hat started small. They took risks, they made bold decisions, and they relied heavily on their community.
Right.
It's a reminder that technology is constantly evolving, and to thrive in that environment, you need to be adaptable and understand the power of collaboration.
I love that. It's inspiring, really. It shows what's possible when you combine a great idea with passion, determination, and a commitment to open collaboration. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it leaves us with a question to ponder. What will the next chapter of Red Hat's story hold? Will they continue to dominate the enterprise Linux market, or will new challengers emerge? Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, Red Hat's journey is a testament to the power of open source, and their story is far from over.
Well said. It's going to be fascinating to see what the future holds for Red Hat and for the open source world in general.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the history of Red Hat Linux. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit inspiring. We'll catch you on the next episode of Ctrl+Talk.